Why aren't more people talking about climate change? In Washington, D.C., at the first Native Organized Conference on Climate Change, we hear from Native communities about the devastation that climate change has already inflicted and why they gathered to demand loudly, stop. At first glance, this meeting in Washington, D.C. may look familiar. The audience was interested and the speakers well prepared. Environmentalists and scientists gave talks about climate change and its causes. U.S. senators and tribal witnesses from coastal Indian nations spoke, exchanged information, and discussed plans to combat, minimize, or even reverse climate change. And this scientist from New Zealand spoke in a key slot at the symposium, with good reason. He is the first and only Samoan to be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize.
The question is climate change real or not? Well, it depends on who you talk to. Because from a scientific perspective, it is real.
The subject, one that touches everyone, regardless of background, political party, nationality, or tribe.
Where all of us are in the same canoe, and so that's the way I see it. You know, the scientists, federal government, traditional people, we're all in the same canoe, and so we all need to paddle in the same direction. Yeah. And we can't do it independently of each other. I don't believe that's possible anymore.
Those attending the first Steward Symposium here in D.C. stress we all share the same plane and climate change is already here. Whether entirely man-made or from cycles in nature, climate change is already hurting indigenous people.
If you looked at the presentation on acidification yesterday by a leading U.S. scientist, you wonder how we're going to make it. That the effects of carbon, as one of the elders said earlier, actually from Quileute, that the carbon from the Model A and the Model T has not yet hit the ocean. That's scary. This is a very real and scary subject, so we need people to come forward and put aside their differences and say, how are we going to ever make it?
It was the first of its kind, an examination of climate change on indigenous coastal cultures. Sponsored by 4 Pacific coastal tribes, the first Steward Symposium promised a groundbreaking dialogue with hundreds of tribal leaders, experts, and policymakers. And we at Miccosukee Magazine TV can tell you the event delivered as promised. Yet there was one more amazing thing about this event at the National Museum of the American Indian.
This conference differs than all the other conferences because it's led by the indigenous people. And all the panels are made up of mostly indigenous people. A lot of times you find the feds and the state representatives in there as well, but this one's predominantly hosted and led by the indigenous people, which is unique. And I find it warming to be able to hear from them themselves.
And that sends a far different message to Washington's federal government, state, and local U.S. officials. This was organized entirely by Native Americans from their perspective.
They will see what we've been able to plan for ourselves, and so that makes us stronger so we can actually say, this is what we want in the future. You know, so policies aren't just passed without considering what we want to be done. It's a huge step. It's visibility, and visibility is 80% of the game.
Ed Johnstone was instrumental in setting up the conference. He came as a witness from his home on Washington State's coastal area. Johnstone told Miccosukee Magazine TV's executive producer, Houston Cypress, in the most personal terms possible, what climate change means to him and his tribe.
The importance is we've been here from the beginning of time. And so we've observed these changes. We're the first to notice these changes.
A tribe that lives off of the ocean. Salmon to the Quinault people is life, Johnstone says.
Frankly, if that halibut doesn't live, if the eagle no longer soars, if the bears can no longer walk the beach and end up in the high country for berries in the summer, if those components don't live, we don't live.
Johnstone spoke for many Native Americans when he said, "These things tell a story. When you include our story, It will be better explained to the rest of the country as we all deal with climate change.